So originally this video was going to be about something else entirely, but as I started researching, I found myself going down rabbit holes that revealed something much bigger than I expected. What I'm about to share might sound conspirative at first, but bear with me, as the more I talk, the more you might begin to see the truth, as I did. Now, I want to begin with Plato's Allegory of the Cave, which uses the metaphor of prisoners born in a cave, chained and forced to face a wall. On the wall, shadows are cast, and this becomes their reality, until one day, one of the prisoners escapes and sees the outside world. He can't believe what he's seeing, so he returns to tell his friends, who all contest and condemn what the man saw. Now, this philosophy is often used to demonstrate the acceptance of appearance as truth and the struggle to grasp true knowledge and enlightenment. In this allegory, most people focus on the prisoners, but in this video, we're going to focus on them, the ones who cast the shadows, and do so through looking at the gaming industry. So DEI has infested gaming. You know it, I know it, there's no disputing it. When we discuss this topic though, it's often accompanied with questions. Questions like why? Why would they do this when they're losing so much money? Why do developers now tell us, if you don't like it, don't play it? Don't they want us to play their games? Why don't they just make good games like they used to? Fun games with relatable stories, interesting themes, and engaging mechanics. What if I told you this was all by design? The developers are the puppets, but who's pulling the strings? Now, DEI is the buzzword everyone focuses on, but there's another important acronym we need to understand here. ESG. Environmental, Social, and Governance. ESG is a scoring system for companies that determines investment decisions and stakeholder engagements. Simply put, the higher your ESG score, the more investment you're likely to receive. ESG has been around since about 2004, first appearing in a UN report titled Who Cares Wins, linked in the description down below. In this document, they outline their vision for ESG. Now, when you hear environmental, social, and governance and the mission statement, it might sound like progress, something worth supporting. But, like so many things before, what appears to be positive social progress is actually a cash grab and power play. To summarize the 2004 ESG proposal, it's an investment framework for hedge funds, created through invitation-only events by the UN Global Compact, the IFC, and Swiss government. They've essentially monetized human empathy itself. Now, products come and go, trends ebb and flow, but emotions, things like compassion, imagine if you could package that into a product, sell it, then weaponize it to create opposition, then turn around and sell the ammunition to both sides. You'd be funding and profiting from an endless war over belief itself. Now, how does this apply to gaming? Let's use Dustborn as an example. Hailed as a DEI failure with gameplay abilities like getting triggered.
You are racist.
Now, you might laugh and dismiss it based on sales figures, but let's look deeper. Now, who funded Dustborn? The Norwegian Film Institute, an organization firmly in the grips of ESG requirements. But who assigns these ESG scores in the first place? Who determines if you're morally righteous enough for investment? Well, third parties like MSCI and Sustainalytics. And who owns these rating companies? Well, financial institutions, specifically in this case, a corporation called Morningstar. Now, setting aside the satanic rabbit hole we could explore with the connection to Lucifer, the Morningstar, their investment portfolio also includes, big shocker, pharmaceutical companies. Morningstar also isn't alone. Bloomberg also handles ESG ratings, while corporations like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street all invest heavily in DEI and ESG initiatives. Now, think about the strategy here. These same companies pushing ESG scores that demand DEI in our games are heavily invested in pharmaceuticals, including neuroleptics, hormone blockers, and weight loss medication. Now, imagine creating a population that's increasingly neurotic, riddled with anxiety, and divided into warring factions of moral superiority, then selling the medication, processed foods, and comforts to never leave the house. Now, it starts with heavily processed foods, creating widespread obesity and diabetes, then moves to cultivating an increasingly anxious population. The snowball grows, until we're completely dependent on these mega corporations. Now you might wonder, if they're funding these games and the games are losing money, how are they profiting? Like, why continue investing? Now this confused me too before I did the research. Now these mega corporations aren't concerned with direct profit from any single investment. They operate by creating systems where money flows from one venture to another, building towards larger objectives. Game studios aren't concerned with consumer profits because they receive private investments for their messaging. So when they say, if you don't like it, don't play it, or the game wasn't meant for you, believe them. It wasn't. This explains why people like Corinne Bush can create a dumpster fire like Veilguard and receive a bilateral promotion instead of being blacklisted. Or why Concord's entire management team simply transferred to Halo Studios after their massive flop. In any other industry, these people would have been run out of town for such ineptitudes, but here they thrive, oftentimes failing forward towards success, as those who conform are often rewarded while those who question find themselves falling from grace. The industry is riddled with a culture of toxic positivity as well. After all, studios compete harder and harder for smaller and smaller contracts, so how could you say no? Now, the way this usually goes is something kind of like this. An executive from Mount High comes down and tells you that this is what you're making. You say okay, and yes, you get some creative wiggle room, you create the visuals, you write the script, and so on, but you don't control the messaging or the end result, unless you're the one who actually owns the IP. Games like Mass Effect, Gears of War, Diablo, and so on were so great because the ones who created the IP were the developers. But when the license gets handed off to the highest bidder, do you really think they're going to spend $500 million to then let some creative use the brand for self-fulfillment? No, that's not how this works. There are plenty of cases, of course, where not every game was the brainchild of some sinister mastermind, but it does trickle down. Now, they target IPs we love because it fuels our never-ending culture wars, which increases their stock portfolio value. A game may lose $100 million publicly, but the studio was given $200 million in investment to create it, so that's not really a failure for the game studio. That's $150 million in profit. On top of this, they're also going after studios with breakout hits such as Embracer Group's recent acquisition of Warhorse Studios. Now, you may think that's great, more money, smoother development, but if we look closely, Embracer Group is a signature member of the UN Global Compact. If you remember, this is the same body who literally wrote the book on ESG, and it shows. As even in their sustainability document from this past year, which I will also link in the description down below, they list how, for example, they want to double the number of female studio heads and managing directors by this year, noting only 30% of their staff in total are female, 23% of which are in management positions already. Meaning if you are a woman at any studio across Embracer Group, this year you get a front row seat, and by the end of this year, they are looking to have roughly 60% of employment female, 46% of which being in management. Now, quite frankly, I find this to be actually anti-woman in this case, as a true supporter of women or any group would welcome fair competition for a sought-after position, ultimately giving it strictly to the person most capable and most qualified, as opposed to handicapping the competitor on the basis of physical markers alone, as current staff gets pushed out in favor of Embracer Group's initiative. Now, AAA studios are no longer beholden to players or even their own success. Think about it. You could work tirelessly for 4 years on a game just to break even with no funding for a sequel, or you could apply for an ESG score, conform to the demands, use that score to get a loan, and receive tenfold funding to make games for the next decade. Now, when these games are released, controversy becomes a secondary benefit. The real goal is, after all, creating division, while increasing dependence on these corporations. You will own nothing and be happy, a very famous quote. Games are just a small part of a much larger strategy, and we see it everywhere. Take-Two CEO saying games should be charged per hour, Dasani CEO even trying to monetize California water rights. For trillion-dollar companies, this isn't about mere money, it's about ownership, plain and simple. Nothing happens by accident, it's all by design. Even YouTube's algorithm now makes it harder to find smaller channels while promoting divisive content. To stay relevant and grow, channels must create increasingly controversial videos, fueling the outrage machine. Meanwhile, attention spans diminish as people who once sought purpose now seek simple distractions, now finding themselves doom-scrolling TikTok for 10-second dopamine bursts because facing reality is, quite frankly, sometimes overwhelming. Now, I'd say that's where we're headed, but for many, it's unfortunately where we already are. Now, this brings us back to Plato's allegory of the cave, where megacorporations choose the shadows cast on the walls that become our inevitable reality, and we fight anyone who challenges our perception of it. This isn't even genuinely about diversity. Game studios have tokenized minorities for profit, and it's not even hard to see. I mean, can you really look me in the eyes and tell me that a team of white developers haphazardly inserting a black character into a Japanese period piece while playing hip-hop music isn't exploiting a race?
Greed cannot rule this village. Not while I have breath in my lungs and a blade in my head.
Or that carelessly making every character bi or gay anymore really represents thoughtful inclusion? I mean, with plenty of talented writers available, why are we stuck with dialogue like this?
Lust is a journey of 1,000 steps that begins with a kiss.
Or even worse, this.
So, I'm non-binary.
The big debate is about diversity, right? One side argues the need for more diversity, the other questions their qualifications, but you know what diversity I'm really interested in? The one that I think actually matters? I really think the diversity that actually matters is this one. Major stakeholders and owners. EA, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. Disney, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. Warner Bros, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. Amazon, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. Microsoft, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. Take-Two, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. Every major publisher and entertainment company is owned by the same entities. The same ones, mind you, that fund DEI and ESG initiatives. The same ones, the same three corporations that also, by the way, own each other, controlling both sides of a moral war while profiting from the conflict. While I was editing this video, I realized I didn't add a summary, which I wanted to do right now. These studios, plain and simple, don't care about your opinion. They don't need you. In any other industry, if you ship a product that loses about $200 million, your business is probably going to be shutting down. But not entertainment. And why? Because it's social engineering. Veilguard, for example, lost $200 million for EA, yet BlackRock alone gave them around $700 million between this past November and February alone. Now, that's more even than their best projections on game sales. So when you wonder why they keep pushing a narrative or making bad games, buggy games, one could argue it's because the product has shifted. Sure, the package is a game, but the product is social contagion. It's a long-term investment to control the way you think. Now, I'm from a time where no one even cared about your race. No one talked about politics. And as a kid, you were just too busy being outside, running around, having fun, just being young with your friends. Today, though, people are born into a rage-fueled world of politics and virtue, where you're raised to feel hopeless, where you're forced to pick a side, and whether you do or don't, your peers will assess your values and determine if you're friend or foe. Our reality has become one of overindulgence, one of the chronically medicated, and before, we at least used to be able to escape into movies and games, but not anymore. We are bred to be consumers, plain and simple. Games aren't made for gamers anymore, not from these publicly traded companies at least. Never forget, he who has the gold makes the golden rule. And in a market where hedge funds overrule the gamers in this case, whose voice do you think they're really listening to? The best way to control the future is to destroy the past. If they continue taking games, stories, and movies we love and distorting them into their own chosen realities, we'll end up getting a brave new world, where one day people will look back and never recognize what came before. And it's already happening. As far as what to do about it, best thing in my opinion is to just don't engage. If our corporate overlords want to fuel hate to keep you anxious and medicated while addicted to processed foods, pills, and short-form content, then best we can do is fight back in the opposite. And I think we're starting to see that a bit, but we have quite a ways to go, I also think. Things like if you don't agree with the game, just don't buy it. Don't engage with the messaging. Get out and enjoy life. Have fun with your friends. If you don't have any, join a group. Heck, join our Discord and I'll be your friend. Best thing we can do collectively is stand by our principles, have an unwavering resolve, and really just ignore the attention-seeking megacorps who buy and sell your engagements. Now, that's it for this one. Hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.